Winter's grip. The wind keened a mournful song, each blast a frigid lash against Lily's cheek. Icy spicules danced in the air, obscuring her vision in a white haze. She strained to see past the swirling tempest. Home couldn't be far, just over the rise, yet the blizzard twisted distance into a cruel jest. Blue, her grizzled shepherd mix, trudged beside her, his once luxuriant coat plastered with snow. A low rumble, almost swallowed by the gale, escaped his throat. Lily patted his back through her thick mittens, finding comfort in his familiar warmth. Nearly there, boy, she yelled, though the words were likely lost to the storm. Almost home. She snugged her woolen scarf tighter, the coarse weave chafing her skin. The supply run to town had been unavoidable. Ma was desperate for essentials, and Pa's medicine was nearly gone. But the return had devolved into a desperate struggle against the elements. The sky had been a serene blue upon her departure, a deceptive promise of a tranquil winter day. Now the world was a blinding white void, each step a challenge. She stumbled, her boot snagging on a concealed root. Blue yipped, his footing faltering. Lily steadied herself, pulling him upright. He leaned into her for a moment, shivering. She knew he was weary, his old bones protesting the cold. Still, he persevered. He always did. He was her shadow, her sentinel, her dearest companion. Pa's image flickered behind her eyelids, his face drawn and pale against the pillow. A stark contrast to the robust visage she'd always known. The cough had begun subtly, a mere tickle, before morphing into a brutal, debilitating spasm that left him drained. Ma had exhausted her remedies, honeyed lemon, herbal infusions, mustard plasters, to no avail. The town doctor's medicine offered some respite, but procuring it, especially now, was a heavy burden. Lily banished the thought, focusing on the immediate need. She had to reach home. Ma would be beside herself with worry, and the stock needed tending. Since Pa's illness, the farm's responsibilities rested entirely on her shoulders. She milked, fed, chopped wood, and struggled to maintain the house's warmth. Some days she felt submerged, the endless toil threatening to overwhelm her. But she couldn't yield. Not now. Her family depended on her resilience. The wind surged, attacking her cloak like an angry phantom. Visibility dwindled to mere feet. Familiar landmarks vanished beneath the snowdrifts, towering pines reduced to spectral forms. Panic began to nibble at her resolve. What if she was hopelessly lost? She closed her eyes briefly, conjuring the homestead, the steadfast log cabin, smoke curling from the chimney, the inviting glow of lamplight spilling from the windows. She recalled the aroma of Ma's baking, Pa's soft humming, the sense of sanctuary that permeated every corner. The vision spurred her onward. Blue nudged her hand with his snout, a gentle, insistent pressure. She met his gaze, his eyes mirroring a blend of worry and unwavering loyalty. He was her touchstone, reminding her she wasn't alone in this ordeal. "Come on, boy," she rasped. "Let's find our way home." They pressed onward, bodies angled against the forceful wind. Lily concentrated on each step, her senses alert for any familiar sign. She listened for the murmur of the creek, the distant baying of a canine neighbor, anything to guide her. Then a fleeting gap in the swirling snow revealed a faint glimmer in the distance. Relief surged through her, a warmth spreading from her core. It was the window of their home. "Blue, I see it." "The light," she shouted, her voice cracking with elation. Blue barked, a feeble but joyful sound. He seemed to draw upon hidden reserves, his pace gaining a fraction. They quickened their steps, hope lightening their load. The light intensified, beckoning them forward. Soon, the cabin's shape emerged. A humble but resilient beacon in the heart of the storm. Reaching the porch, Ma flung open the door, her face a mask of anxiety. "Lily, thank heavens. We were so afraid." Lily stumbled into her mother's embrace, burying her face in the comforting folds of her skirt. The scent of hearth smoke and pine assailed her nostrils, an exquisite relief after the storm's biting breath. "I'm here, Ma," she mumbled. "We're both here." Ma drew back, her gaze sweeping over Lily, then Blue. "You're both half frozen," she fretted. "Get inside, quickly. I'll make hot tea." They crossed the threshold, shutting out the tempest. The fire's warmth enveloped them, dispelling the chill. Lily collapsed into a chair, feeling the accumulated tension seep from her. Blue sank to her feet, his tail giving a weak thump against the floorboards. Ma moved with practiced efficiency around the kitchen. She filled the kettle and spooned generous portions of honey into 2 mugs. "Pa's been asking for you," she said softly. "He's been unsettled all afternoon." Lily nodded, her heart aching. She knew she must see him, reassure him that all was well. But first, she needed to thaw out, to summon the strength for the task that awaited. Winter's icy dominion held sway both outside and within their small cabin, but they would confront it together as a family. Dreams of spring. The wind was a banshee's cry, each blast clawing at Lily's already numb cheeks. The medicine, a dense weight in her satchel, felt almost mocking against the immensity of the blizzard, and the dread coiled tight in her stomach. She cinched her scarf tighter, the coarse wool a meager shield against the icy onslaught. Beside her, Blue plodded onward, his usually jaunty tail drooping, his breath pluming in ragged bursts. Lily's mittened hand sought the thick ruff of his neck. He pressed into her touch, a wordless exchange of resolve. With each step a hard-won victory against the mounting drifts. Her mind sought refuge in memories of sun-drenched days. She conjured the image of their cabin's meadow, a vibrant tapestry beneath the summer sky. Wild blossoms, lupin, columbine, crimson paintbrushes, danced in the balmy air, their fragrance a sweet intoxication. Bees droned contentedly among the blooms, a living hum of life. She could almost feel the sun's kiss on her skin, the yielding earth beneath her bare feet. She remembered Pa, his calloused hands stained with soil, teaching her their names. He'd traced the delicate filigree of a leaf, the complex architecture of a petal, revealing the beauty concealed in the natural world's minutiae. His lessons were more than botany. They were about celebrating life's tenacity, the capacity of even the most vulnerable to flourish against adversity. Now, adversity was her constant companion, and Pa was far from flourishing. Rebirth. That's where her focus needed to be. The thought was a nascent bud in the frozen terrain of her mind. Rebirth meant Pa guiding her hands as they seeded the vegetable patch, his booming laugh echoing across the fields as they waged war on scavenging crows. It meant the rich scent of upturned earth, the hopeful promise of verdant shoots emerging from their winter slumber. It meant believing. She envisioned him, sturdy and upright, his face etched with lines, yet his eyes sparkling with that familiar warmth. Holding a handful of seeds, his voice, though gravelly, brimming with vitality, he'd say, "Lily, girl, this year's crop will be the best we've ever seen." The vision was so palpable, so real, that for a fleeting moment she forgot the wind's teeth and the needles of snow. A surge of resolve coursed through her, a renewed sense of mission. Return was paramount. She had to deliver the medicine to Pa. He was depending on her. "Come on, Blue," she rasped, her voice swallowed by the tempest. "We're nearly there." Blue pricked his ears, tilting his head as if he, too, had caught a phantom echo of her father's mirth. He nudged her palm with his cold, wet nose, then renewed his weary trek, drawing on some hidden reserve of strength. But the storm refused to relent. The wind intensified, whipping the snow into a disorienting, swirling maelstrom. Visibility was reduced to mere feet. Familiar waypoints, the ancient, arthritic oak, the stand of skeletal birches, had disappeared, consumed by the white abyss. Panic threatened, a frigid tide threatening to drown her determination. She stumbled, her boots snagging on a root concealed beneath the drifts. She cried out, fighting to regain her footing. Blue whined, circling her in agitation. Lily squeezed her eyes shut, summoning a deep breath. Calm was her only ally. Pa's recovery hinged on her. Again his face appeared in her mind, the laugh lines radiating from his eyes as he smiled. She recalled his stories, tales of resilience and triumph, of pioneers who had overcome even greater hardships. He always said, "The land will test you, Lily, but show strength and unwavering faith and it will provide." She opened her eyes, scanning the blinding white. She couldn't see the land, but she could feel its solid presence beneath her, unyielding and eternal. And faith remained. Faith in herself, in Blue, and in the eventual return of spring. She moved forward, step by measured step. She fixated on the sound of Blue's labored breathing, the feel of his thick coat under her hand, the mental image of Pa's hopeful smile. The blizzard still raged, but the icy grip of fear loosened, replaced by a quiet grit. She was Lily Maeve, daughter of this land, and she would not succumb. Not to the storm's fury, not to the frigid bite of the wind, and not to the darkness threatening to engulf her. She would usher in spring for her Pa, one arduous step at a time. The hidden fall. The gale shrieked, a spectral lament that vibrated in Lily's bones. Each blast slammed into her, vying to wrest away her painstaking progress. Blue, his coat frosted with snow, huddled close, a warm, furry bulwark against the swirling white chaos. She anchored herself to the cadence of her breaths, the fiery ache in her muscles, desperately warding off encroaching hopelessness. The world had dissolved into a monochrome canvas, the horizon an indistinguishable blur of white and gray. She possessed a mental map of the route home, recalling landmarks submerged by the snow, the gaunt silhouette of the ancient oak, the askew fence post delineating Widow McCreary's land. Yet, the tempest scorned her familiarity, warping known shapes into treacherous mirages. She pressed on, her vision locked onto Blue's dark form ahead. He moved with a dogged resolve that echoed her own. Then, without warning, the solid ground betrayed her. One moment she battled forward, the next she plunged into emptiness. The world spun violently, the wind a deafening roar as she plummeted down an unseen declivity. Snow engulfed her, blinding and suffocating. She flailed, grasping for purchase, but found nothing to grip. The fall was brief, yet brutal. She landed heavily, the air expelled from her lungs in a whoosh. A searing lance of pain pierced her left ankle. Prismatic bursts exploded behind her eyes. For a moment she lay paralyzed, gasping, the icy wind a brutal caress. Above, Blue's frantic barks rasped through the tempest's fury. She attempted to rise, but a wave of nausea crashed over her. The throbbing in her ankle was agonizing. "Blue, help," she rasped, the sound swallowed by the raging wind. He whined again, a distressed query. She could hear him scrambling at the precipice, striving to reach her. Slowly, with immense effort, she managed to sit. The world swayed, but the mental haze began to dissipate. She found herself at the base of a shallow gully, a hidden hollow she hadn't realized existed. Drifting snow had fashioned a deceptive softness that masked the sudden drop. Her ankle pulsed with each heartbeat. Reaching down, she probed carefully. The joint felt loose, precarious. Despite the layers of thick socks, she suspected the worst. A sprain, optimistically. A fracture, more likely. Panic constricted her throat. She was marooned. The embankment was too steep and slick to ascend with her injury. And the blizzard showed no sign of relenting. The wind screamed, peppering her face with icy needles. Blue, still barking with worry above, began to excavate at the snowy verge of the ravine. Small showers of snow cascaded down, dusting her. "It's okay, boy," she murmured, her voice trembling. "I'm okay." But she wasn't. She was isolated, injured, and trapped within a raging storm. The medicine for her father remained secure in her pack, but its value dwindled with each passing moment she remained stranded. She raised her gaze to the swirling snow, the leaden sky pressing down. Despair loomed, a frigid, smothering tide. She pictured her father, his gentle eyes, his warm smile. She recalled his familiar refrain during their walks in the woods. "Even in winter's darkest grip, lily-bug, a flicker of life awaits its bloom." She closed her eyes, concentrating on that ember. She had to nurture it, safeguard it. Her father depended on her. She inhaled deeply, forcing coherence. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. She had to be clever. She had to tap into her reserves. She was a Maeve, after all. Resilience coursed through her veins. First, a reckoning of her situation was crucial. What was the extent of her ankle injury? Was any movement possible? And how could she signal with Blue unable to reach her? The dog continued to dig, whimpering, but he was small and the slope remained unforgiving. She opened her eyes, searching for anything that might offer assistance. The wind's ululation served as a constant reminder of her perilous predicament. The snow persisted, entombing her further within the drift. The spark flickered, threatened by the encroaching darkness. But it stubbornly refused to die. Not yet. Blue's leap of faith. Blue's bark, a frantic, high-pitched yelp, bounced off the gully walls, a jarring note against the blizzard's deep-throated roar. Lily, pressed against the slick, frozen rock, watched him fret at the rim, his sable coat speckled with ice crystals. Each bark was a raw exclamation, a frantic query born of pure anxiety. "Steady, boy," she croaked, her voice a threadbare whisper. The gale devoured her words, yet Blue seemed to glean her meaning. A low, rumbling groan escaped him, vibrating through her very core as he worried at the snow-laden ground, showering the abyss below with white. He fixed her with soulful amber eyes, a battle raging within their depths, then swung his gaze back to the endless, swirling expanse that pointed towards the farm. She understood his turmoil. He was a herder, a guardian, with generations of vigilance woven into his very being. His instincts screamed for action, for him to summon aid, to retrieve her father. But the tether of years, the profound connection they shared, held him fast. "Go," she implored, the word tasting like bile. "Go home. Find Papa." His ears drooped, tail tucked tight to his body. Another plaintive whimper, a sound that shredded Lily's weakening resolve. He refused, clearly. Then, a shift. A steely glint replaced the anxiety in his eyes. Retracing his steps, he gathered himself, his focus narrowing solely to her. Lily's breath caught. She anticipated his next move. "Blue, don't," she cried, but the plea was already futile. A surge of muscular power propelled him forward. For a terrifying instant, he hung suspended in the chaotic whiteness, a dark, fleeting shape against the storm's fury. Lily squeezed her eyes shut, bracing. The drop was a dizzying chasm of at least 10 feet, with a landing uncertain. A soft thud, followed by a suppressed yelp, reached her ears. Relief, a tidal wave of pure bliss, crashed over her as she opened her eyes. He was there, a dazed lump at the base of the gully, shaking off snow and disorientation. A slight limp marked his gait, but his tail gave a tentative wag. "You stubborn idiot," Lily breathed, tears pricking at her lids. He righted himself, bounding toward her, a low growl rumbling in his chest, directed at the pitiless landscape itself. He nudged her hand with his frigid nose, then swiped her face with a warm, wet tongue, a stark contrast to the biting wind. Lily embraced him, burying her face in the dense warmth of his fur. "You didn't have to do that," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "You could have been seriously hurt." A soft, comforting whine was his reply as he pressed himself against her injured leg. He trembled, not just from the cold, but the residual effects of adrenaline. Lily stroked his head, tracing the reassuring pulse beneath her fingertips. The throbbing in her ankle was a constant, sharp reminder, yet with Blue beside her, the suffocating despair began to lift. She wasn't abandoned. The wind keened, a desolate lament that seemed to taunt their struggle. Snow continued its relentless descent, blanketing the gully in an ever-deepening shroud. The dwindling light cast eerie, distorted shadows that danced along the frozen walls. Yet, within that small, snow-covered hollow, a spark of life persisted. Blue shifted again, placing his weight carefully against her, a breathing bulwark against the encroaching cold. His fur, though damp, provided a meager shield against the elements. Lily closed her eyes, drawing strength from his unwavering presence. More than just a dog, he was her comrade, her guardian, loyalty and courage made flesh. A living link to home, a vibrant reminder of all she was fighting to preserve. She had to keep him alive, keep them both alive. Whispers of bravery. The wind keened a desolate dirge, each blast raking Lily's exposed skin like icy talons. Blue, pressed close, remained the sole haven of warmth in a world succumbing to frost. His once luxuriant coat was plastered with snow, yet his presence offered a reassuring weight against her side. She stroked his head, feeling the coarse texture of his fur through her mitten. "Good boy, Blue," she croaked, her voice sandpapered by the cold. "Good boy." Her pa often recounted Blue's history, tales embellished with time, yet rooted in reality. Before he was Lily's faithful friend, he was Blue, the advanced scout. Samuel Maeve had adopted him after the cessation of hostilities. He rarely elaborated on Blue's wartime exploits, but Lily gleaned fragments from veterans' reverent murmurs, a regard that both captivated and daunted her. He navigated patrols through the peaks Pa had shared once, his gaze distant, adrift in recollection. Discovered routes unseen by any man. Saved countless lives. Lily had envisioned it then, a younger, more formidable Blue, bounding across perilous terrain, his sensitive nose detecting hazards, his bark a warning against lurking threats. She imagined him conquering sheer ice faces, his paws finding purchase where human feet would falter. She pictured him bravely enduring blizzards, his eyes mere slits against the stinging snow, his resolve unyielding. She heard phantom gunfire, saw fleeting explosions, and envisioned Blue gallantly leading injured soldiers to safety. Now, sheltered in the snow-laden hollow, that image seemed impossibly remote, a comforting myth to banish the encroaching darkness. And yet, as the wind's howl intensified, mimicking the lamentations of the lost, Lily clung to those stories, to the legend of Blue. He was more than just canine, he was a paragon of courage. He had confronted far greater dangers, hadn't he? He had gazed into the abyss and emerged unscathed. Now he was here, with her. He could have sought aid. He should have left. But he remained. The realization jolted Lily like an electric shock. Blue, the scout, the hero of the war, had chosen to stay. He wasn't merely providing warmth, he was offering something far deeper, unwavering devotion, a silent pledge that she was not forsaken. A fresh tremor surged through her. Her extremities pulsed with a dull ache, her eyelids felt leaden, pulled down by exhaustion. The lure of surrender, to simply succumb to the beckoning snow, was almost irresistible. Then, Blue nudged her hand with his cold, damp nose. His dark eyes, usually animated with playful spirit, now burned with a quiet intensity and unshakable determination. He was communicating something. Silently, he was reminding her of the fortitude that lay dormant within her. He was showing her that even amidst insurmountable challenges, hope could still glimmer. She thought of Pa, ailing and helpless back at the farmstead. She recalled his kind smile, his work-worn hands that had taught her to decipher the land, his steadfast faith in her. She couldn't yield. She wouldn't. Closing her eyes, Lily drew a deep breath, the frigid air scalding her lungs. She conjured Blue, not as he was now aged and fatigued, but as he once was, a youthful and spirited scout, bravely leading the way. She gleaned strength from his phantom valor, from the echoes of Pa's tales. She would weather this. She had to. Opening her eyes, Lily discovered a renewed grit solidifying within her. The terror hadn't completely dissipated, yet it was now tempered by a resolute will. She would persevere. She would claw her way from this ravine. She would discover a means to signal for rescue. "We're not finished yet, Blue," she declared, her voice resonating with newly found conviction. "We will get through this. Together." Blue responded with a soft whine, then swiped her face with his tongue, the sensation rough and warm against her frozen skin. It wasn't mere affection. It was affirmation. It was a commitment. Lily shifted, attempting to find a less painful position. Each movement unleashed a burst of pain through her injured leg, but she disregarded it. She concentrated instead on the image of Blue, the scout, the hero, the devoted friend. She focused on Pa, awaiting her return at their home. She focused on the whispers of valor echoing in her soul, urging her onward. The blizzard persisted. The wind continued its mournful cry, but something fundamental had altered within Lily. She was no longer simply a girl lost to the elements. She was a survivor, propelled by affection, loyalty, and the unwavering spirit of a champion by her side. Fading warmth. The world lurched in and out of clarity, a broken kaleidoscope. One moment, the wind's icy needles pricked Lily's skin. The next, she dissolved into a phantom warmth, sunlight ghosting across her face in a forgotten July. The gnawing cold always returned, a brutal counterpoint to her fleeting reveries. Time became elastic, each tick an age, each hour a wisp of smoke. She nestled closer to Blue, seeking the haven of his body heat, a solace she desperately craved. But something was amiss. The warmth, once a furnace, now felt banked, diminished. A shiver coursed through Blue, a subtle ripple against her own frame. Instinctively, she gripped him tighter, nails biting into his dense fur. "Blue," she murmured, her voice thick with the sludge of sleep and depletion. "Are you all right?" No answering woof, no comforting nudge of his head. Only a low, almost subsonic moan that vibrated through her like a phantom limb. Panic ignited, a frigid terror that dwarfed even the blizzard's rage. Lily fought to sit, each muscle screaming in protest, a symphony of agony recalling every mile she'd clawed across the frozen wasteland. Propped on one elbow, she scanned Blue's face. His eyes, usually bright with canine intelligence, were veiled by a milky haze. His breath came in ragged gasps, each inhale a visible struggle. Frost clung to his lashes, forming delicate white spikes. He looked frail, his powerful build somehow shrunk, swallowed by the remorseless freeze. "No," she breathed, the sound stolen by the wind's shriek. "No, Blue, please." She understood the grim calculus of survival. She'd witnessed it firsthand, the brutal arithmetic of the homestead. Animals surrendered to the cold, their life force ebbing with the fading sun. But not Blue. Her Blue. He was resilience incarnate, a furry fortress. He was her heart. Desperation surged, lending her a jolt of adrenaline. She fumbled with her coat buttons, her numb fingers clumsy, unresponsive. She had to bolster his warmth, offer him the dregs of her own dwindling supply. With a grunt, she wrestled the coat open, draping it around Blue as best she could. She tucked the edges tight, a makeshift shield against the encroaching frost. "Come on, boy," she begged, her voice fracturing. "Stay with me. Just a little longer. Okay?" She pressed her face into his fur, inhaling his familiar musk, a blend of damp earth, snow, and an essence that was purely blue. Eyes shut, she conjured a vision of him in his prime. A lithe, energetic pup, dashing through the woods, his tail a joyous blur. She recalled his unwavering devotion, his silent strength, the uncanny way he mirrored her moods, her silent language. The image dissolved, shattered by the rasp of his labored breathing, the palpable fading of his life force. A single tear escaped, crystallizing instantly on her skin. She couldn't succumb. She had to sustain his warmth. She had to intervene. But her eyelids felt like lead weights, dragging her down into the abyss of exhaustion and the siren song of the cold. The world swam, the wind a dull drone, the snow a relentless, blinding white. She strained to focus on Blue, the feel of his coarse fur, the sound of his rasping breaths. But it was receding like a tide pulling away from the shore. She was losing him to the encroaching darkness. A memory surfaced, her father's calloused hands enveloping hers, guiding her as he taught her the ancient art of fire-making. Never surrender, Lilybug, he'd urged, his voice a bedrock of strength. Even in the deepest night, there's a flickering flame waiting to be stoked. That flame felt microscopic now, almost snuffed out by the engulfing despair. But it persisted, a faint ember glowing weakly within her. She clung to it, desperately trying to coax it into a blaze. She had to find a solution. She had to endure. For Blue. For her father's memory. For herself. With a monumental effort, she forced her eyes open, locking her gaze on Blue's face. His eyes remained partially shut, but she perceived a fleeting glint of recognition, a ghost of his former spark. Blue, she whispered, her voice a mere breath. We can do this. We have to understand. She couldn't know if he registered her words. She couldn't know if he grasped the gravity of their predicament. But she had to nurture that hope. She had to cling to the belief that, united, they could ride out the storm as they had weathered countless others. A mother's worry. The cabin's shadows stretched into elongated specters as daylight conceded to dusk. Martha halted mid-stitch, a crease deepening between her brows. Hours passed, Lily should have returned. The final, diluted sunbeams had long since faded beyond the icy window squares, and the wind keened a sorrowful song against the roof. Lily? Martha's call was tight, laced with burgeoning unease. Only the measured pulse of the grandfather clock answered. She abandoned her needlework, the quilt's bright hues now jarring against the chilling premonition gripping her. Pulling on her thick shawl, she stepped out. A frigid blast assaulted her, stealing air. Swirling snow transformed the familiar scene into an alien landscape of white and muted grays. Lily, she cried again, her voice snatched away by the gale and devoured by the storm's immensity. A cold, sharp spike of panic pierced her chest. She floundered toward the barn, the wind a hostile force pressing against her. The livestock shifted nervously in their confines, their soft bellows an anxious chorus. Lily wasn't there. Retracing her path, Martha hastened, boots plunging into deepening drifts. She circled the house, peering into the encroaching gloom, her pleas escalating. Lily, answer me. Inside, she ransacked Lily's small room, a tightening knot in her stomach. Her daughter's coat was missing. So was the small tin of salve intended for her father's ailment. It crashed over her then, the stark realization. Lily had ventured out into that maelstrom. To him. She bolted, heedless of the wind's icy bite, toward the Walker homestead. The windows were unlit. Jedediah Walker answered her frantic knocking, his features composed into stoic concern. Jed, it's Lily. She's gone. She took the salve. Martha's voice quivered, the words spilling out in a desperate torrent. Jed's gaze sharpened, his eyes scanning the churning white fury. How long? I don't know. Hours, perhaps. I thought she was just out playing. Shame seared her throat. She should have foreseen this. She should have stopped her. Jed wasted no breath on blame. We need to find her. Now. He seized his gray coat and a lantern. I'll fetch Evie. You alert the others. Martha needed no further urging. Back to her house she flew, lungs burning, wind lashing her hair. Grabbing her own lantern, she stumbled toward the Bellwether place. Evie Bellwether's door swung open before Martha reached the porch. Jed told me, Evie stated, her tone composed yet firm. I'll start the coffee, have it ready when they bring her back. We need to inform everyone else. Together, they moved from dwelling to dwelling, battling the storm's ferocity, raising the alarm. The tight-knit community responded without question. Doors flew open, lanterns sparked to life, and men and women emerged from their warm sanctuaries, worry etched deeply in their faces. The small assembly at the settlement's heart became a beacon of hope against the engulfing darkness. Jed, his face set, began to organize the search effort. We'll break into triads. Stay within earshot. Mark your trail. And pray we find her before it's too late. He met Martha's gaze, his own softening. She's a resilient girl, Martha. She'll be fighting. As the initial group vanished into the blinding whiteout, their lanterns dancing like embers in the gale, Martha stood with Evie, watching them disappear. The wind screamed around them, a constant, lamenting wail. She'll be fine, Martha, Evie murmured, her voice a soothing balm. She placed a hand on Martha's arm, her touch offering warmth and strength. Martha gazed into the tempestuous night, her heart a heavy weight within her. She knew her daughter's spirit, her indomitable will, but she also recognized the blizzard's implacable might, and a chilling certainty took root. Every lost moment chipped away at Lily's chance. The tracker's hope. Jedediah Walker squinted against the wind's harsh slap. The blizzard, a ravenous wolf, gnawed at any exposed skin, attempting to force them back to the warmth of their homes. But retreat was not an option. Not with Lily Maeve lost out there. He burrowed deeper into his scarf, his exhaled breath blooming into ephemeral white clouds. Spread out, maintain visual contact. He roared, the tempest swallowing most of his words. The small band who had dared the storm responded with curt nods, faces tight with resolve and trepidation. Their lanterns cast feeble halos in the swirling chaos, barely pushing back the oppressive gloom. Jed dropped to one knee, wincing as the frigid bite pierced his layers. He swept a gloved hand over the snow, his fingers encountering a shallow depression. A paw print. Blues. A fragile spark of hope ignited within him. He traced the tracks for several yards, his gaze sweeping the obscured horizon. The gale was determined to obliterate any trace of the animal, filling the indentations as quickly as they were made. Time was slipping away. Each gust, each new layer of snow, amplified their challenge. Martha faltered beside him, her face pale and tear-streaked. Anything, Jedediah? Any sign? He rose, his expression grave. Tracks, Martha. Blues. Faint, though. The storm's burying them fast. He couldn't lie outright, yet he couldn't speak his darkest anxieties aloud. Lily had been missing for hours. In these conditions. He gestured toward the swirling, opaque distance. He's angled toward the creek bed. It figures. Seeking shelter, perhaps. Even in the best circumstances, the creek bed was unforgiving. Steep, icy banks, and the ever-present threat of a winter flood. Jed offered a silent prayer that Lily hadn't attempted a crossing. They forged ahead, the wind a relentless, spiteful presence. The searchers moved like phantoms through the swirling white hell, their lanterns pitching in the dark. Snow pelted their faces, cold deadened their senses, yet they persisted, fueled by urgency and desperate longing. Periodically, Jed would halt, kneel, and scrutinize the ground. Blue's pace was faltering. The tracks were blurring, wandering. The dog was tiring. And if Blue was exhausted? He refused to voice the implication. Jedediah, Martha rasped, her voice strained. We should shout. Maybe she'll hear. Jed nodded, doubtful their voices would carry far in such a maelstrom. Still, they had to try. Lily. Martha's cry tore through the wind, cracking with raw emotion. Lily, can you hear us? The gale devoured her plea, scattering it into the chaotic expanse. The others joined in, their voices a ragged chorus of yearning against the storm's fierce symphony. Jed closed his eyes for an instant, straining to hear. Only the wind answered. A vast, impersonal roar that seemed to mock their efforts. He opened his eyes, meeting Martha's gaze, raw with despair. He knew her thoughts mirrored his own. Time was running out. Each passing moment diminished Lily's odds. He squeezed her shoulder, a firm, reassuring touch. We won't quit, Martha. We'll find her. But even as he spoke the words, a chilling doubt took root. He knew these mountains intimately. He understood the raw power of a winter squall. And sometimes even the most unyielding determination wasn't enough. They continued their grim trek, pursuing the fading trail deeper into the tempest's heart. The wind screamed, snow blinded, and the darkness intensified. Jed studied the faces illuminated by the unsteady lantern light. He saw the weariness, the dread, and the unwavering dedication. They would persevere until they found Lily one way or another. But in his gut, a deep foreboding settled. He feared they were already too late. The tracker's hope, once a radiant beacon, now flickered uncertainly against the storm's onslaught, teetering on the brink of oblivion. The creek bed materialized ahead, a jagged scar in the pristine white canvas. Jed raised a hand, halting the group. A decision loomed. Risk crossing the creek or continue along the treacherous bank. Both paths led to peril. He looked at Martha, her eyes imploring. The burden was his, but she shared its crushing weight. He drew a deep breath, the frigid air searing his lungs. He had to trust his instincts. He had to trust his skills. And he had to pray it would be enough to bring Lily home. A howl in the wind. The creek, a ravenous maw of black water, consumed the falling snow without pause. Jedediah, his face stung crimson by the frigid air, strained to see across the surging torrent. A banshee wind shrieked, clawing at their parkas, threatening to pitch them from the riverbank. Conversation was impossible without touching faces. Tracks vanish here, Jed, Silas bellowed, his voice tight with worry. only white beyond. And the creek, he left the grim implication hanging. They all understood the creek's lethal embrace in this tempest. A cold tendril of apprehension tightened in Jedediah's stomach. He meticulously scanned the opposite shore, desperate for any telltale mark. Nothing. He tightened his hold on his weathered walking stick. Spread out, Jedediah finally rasped. 10 yards. Search for any sign of a crossing. Anything. Heads bowed against the ferocious gusts, the men fanned out along the treacherous bank. Minutes bled into an agonizing eternity, each blast of wind a cruel taunt highlighting Lily's fragility. Jedediah wrestled down the rising tide of despair. He had to remain their steadfast center. Martha depended on it. Then, above the wind's piercing scream, a sound emerged. Fragile, almost non-existent, but undeniably real. Jedediah froze, every nerve on high alert. He raised a gloved hand, silencing the others. Listen. The tempest raged, a deafening white roar. He focused, willing the sound to return. Was he imagining it, a trick of the wind? Then it came again. A low, mournful cry carried on the storm's frigid breath. A howl. Weak, broken, yet unmistakably a howl. Jedediah's spirit surged. It was Blue. He knew that mournful note. Even in its diminished state, it was unmistakable. That's him. Jedediah roared, pointing southward, emotion cracking his voice. It's Blue. He's alive. Hope, a tiny flame, sparked in the men's eyes. They pivoted toward the sound, their faces alight with renewed resolve. He's south, maybe a quarter-mile, Jedediah surmised, squinting against the snow. He's weak, his howl would be louder otherwise. Lily can't be far. Without further prompting, he plunged into the drifts, heading south, the others scrambling to follow. Progress was arduous. The deep, deceptive drifts swallowed them to their knees with each step. The gale continued its assault, trying to force them back, to suffocate them under the snow. But now they had a compass. A sound to guide them. A reason to persevere. As they fought their way through the blinding squall, Jedediah offered a silent plea. He prayed for Lily's resilience, for Blue's faithfulness, and for a sliver of mercy from the storm. He knew time was running out. The sun had begun its descent, bruising the storm clouds with purple hues. The howl sounded again, fainter now, but distinct. It was enough. Enough to spur them onward, enough to sustain their desperate hope. Jedediah pressed forward, his aged bones aching, his lungs burning. He pictured Lily huddled somewhere in the frozen wilderness, cold and terrified. He had to reach her. He had to bring her home. The terrain began to shift. The ground rose, growing steeper and more broken. They were entering a small stand of pines, their boughs laden with snow. The wind still roared, but the trees offered a slight respite. Then, through the swirling white curtain, Jedediah spotted it. A dark form huddled at the base of a pine. He broke into a run, legs churning, breath ragged. The men followed hard on his heels, their faces etched with anticipation. As he neared, the shape resolved. It was Blue. He lay curled tight, his fur plastered with snow, his body trembling violently. He lifted his head weakly as Jedediah approached, a soft whimper escaping. Jedediah knelt beside the dog, his heart hammering in his chest. "Blue," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "Good boy, Blue." "Where is she?" Blue raised his head a fraction, then nudged his nose towards the tree's roots. And there, nestled amongst them, almost lost within the drifts, was Lily. The hero's rest. White bled into Lily's vision, a gallery of blurry faces hovering above. The coarse weave of a blanket chafed her skin, a shocking sensation after the frigid air, like 1,000 tiny needles. Murmurs of concern and relief swirled around her. "Easy, Lily girl," Jed's deep voice, a comforting anchor, sliced through the fog. "You're safe now." She tried to voice her gratitude, but only a parched croak emerged. Jed, understanding, adjusted her in his arms. Then memory crashed back. "Blue." A cold fist clenched her heart. "Blue," she rasped, her voice a fragile thread. "Where's Blue?" The bustle ceased. Jed exchanged a significant glance with a shadowed figure against the snow-laden sky. "He's here, Lily. Right beside you." A tide of warmth, deeper than the blankets, enveloped her. Straining against protesting muscles, she turned her head. There he was, Blue, huddled close, his fur a mask of white, his breath shallow but consistent. A weak wag of his snow-dusted tail accompanied the slight lift of his head. Though exhaustion dulled his normally vibrant gaze, recognition flared within. Jed's gloved hand gently caressed Blue's head. "Good boy." he murmured, emotion thickening his voice. He kept you alive, Lily, a true hero. With infinite care, they separated Blue from her side. A whimper of pure agony escaped Lily's lips, cut short as she saw Jed cradling him securely, his movements measured and tender. Easy now, Lily girl. He's hurt, but he's alive. Both of you are. The journey back to the homestead became a dreamscape of swirling flakes and hushed reassurances. Lily slipped in and out of awareness, clinging to the blanket's embrace and the knowledge of Blue's safety. Each lurch sent a ripple of pain through her, but the thought of her ailing father, of the life-saving medicine, anchored her to the present. Reaching the farm ignited a spark of purposeful frenzy. Martha stood there, worry deeply etched onto her face, her eyes glistening with unshed tears and fierce determination. She surged forward, her hands reaching for Lily, her touch a blend of delicacy and urgency. "Oh, Lily," she whispered, voice cracking, tears now spilling freely. "Thank God, you're back." Strong arms lifted Lily from the makeshift conveyance and carried her inside. The hearth's sudden heat was a balm against her frozen core, banishing the lingering chill. She was placed upon her bed, the familiar, soothing fragrance of lavender and beeswax filling her senses. Evie Bellwether, her touch sure and practiced, started to unwrap the frozen layers, her voice a gentle salve. "We'll get you warmed up, child. Just rest." Warm broth, ladled carefully, spread a comforting heat through her. She drank deeply, her throat a raw scrape. Questions buzzed around her, silenced by Martha's raised hand. "Let her be. She needs to recover." Blue was brought in next, carried with utmost gentleness by Jed. A collective breath of relief filled the room as he was settled on a thick rug near the fire. Evie began her examination, her brow furrowing with concern. "Nasty gash on his leg and exhausted, but he'll pull through," she declared, her tone steady. "He's a tough one, that dog." Lily watched as Evie cleansed and dressed Blue's injury, her heart overflowing with gratitude. He offered a soft whine, but remained still, his unwavering gaze fixed on Lily. As time trickled by, Lily gradually regained her strength. The sharp pain dulled to a persistent ache, and clarity began to dispel the mental fog. She learned that her father was stable, the medicine delivered just in the nick of time. The wave of relief was so overwhelming it brought a fresh flood of tears. Later, with the storm still raging outside, Lily lay nestled against pillows in her bed, swathed in warm coverings. The fire snapped and popped, casting dancing, playful shadows across the room. She glanced over at Blue, sleeping soundly on the rug, his breathing deep and rhythmic. Clean, bandaged, he appeared utterly at peace. She reached out and softly stroked his fur. He stirred faintly, a weak thump of his tail against the rug, before sinking back into slumber. "Thank you, Blue," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved my life." He didn't awaken, but Lily knew he understood. She knew their connection, forged in the crucible of the blizzard, could never be severed. He was more than a pet. He was her guardian, her confidant, her rescuer. The community echoed her sentiments. Tales of his valor spread like wildfire through the homestead, recounted in hushed, reverent tones. He became a symbol of devotion, of fortitude, of the profound kinship between humanity and animals. He was Blue, the homestead's unlikely champion. As Lily drifted into sleep, soothed by the fire's warmth and Blue's regular breaths, she knew she would forever remember the trial she had endured. But she also knew she was not alone. She had Blue, her family, a community that cherished her, and she possessed a newfound inner strength, a resilience born from the heart of the tempest.